Okay, welcome back to refinishing the table. We're going to show you a few different things here. One of the first things I want to show you is this box. You can kind of see all that crud at the bottom of the box. When we were scraping the tabletop, that's the stuff that I was scraping off and dropping into the box. So you can see it's really kind of disgusting, and it's pretty thick. Even though it dried, it's got a real thick residue to it. So that's the varnish and stuff that we're stripping off of all the pieces before we start to sand. And if you take a look at what we've got here with the tabletop, you can see a lot more of this. Now there's some burning over here that we're going to have to take care of, and there's some other issues. But you'll notice how kind of dry and flat this is. You'll also notice that I managed to get into all these little crevices. You can kind of see with a close-up there of how I dug that out. I kind of cheated a little bit. I used the point from the 5-in-1 tool to do the outer railings here. But when it came to this, I got an awl. So I put the point in there and cleaned out as much as I could. And then I took a stripping pad and kind of pressed it in with my thumb and turned it sideways so that I could get most of this out. This will actually turn out really well once we get into the sanding process. But before we can do that, we're going to have to strip the rest of this piece. So I'm going to show you the hard part, which is the stripping of the legs. The reason why the legs are so hard is because they're spindle legs. You can see on here all this different detail. So you've got all these little rounded surfaces that are going on. So it's not exactly easy to strip these the way that I was stripping the tabletop, and it's also not easy to sand these. But these are the things that end up looking beautiful once you do them right. So that's what we're going to do. First thing we've got is we've got the Jasco. Again, got my big jug of Jasco here. I'm using more of that. I've got some of that in the ramekin, same as I had from when we did the tabletop. And again, same deal here. I'm just literally going to be brushing that on and letting it kind of get into all the grooves. Don't cheap out on it. Don't try to spread it. You want to glop it almost. So you want it to be almost a nice, thick, glossy, gooey kind of mess, because the more work you do with this and the more you let this do the work for you, the happier you're going to be once you get a little bit deeper into the sanding process. The chemical does most of the good hard work on that top layer, and that also makes life a lot easier when you're sanding, because you can focus more on smoothing and sanding and making sure that it's a nice, even, flat kind of piece, as opposed to worrying about did you get all the guck off of it, and are some of the areas going to be too too ground down, or if you put too much work into them, in terms of the sander, sometimes you get some real ugly kind of pieces out of there. So as you can see, we're just slopping this on here. We're just making sure that that's going to be kind of sloppy. So you can kind of see the gloss level on this. I'm going to walk this over so you can see a little bit closer. I mean, we're talking like drippy, kind of goopy. And again, that's why I got the gloves on, to make sure that that doesn't affect anything. But you make sure you cover it all. Now, again, you don't have to wait for forever for this, but I am going to put it down for a minute here, because I want to answer a couple of questions about what it is that I've been using. Fingerprint on there. We're going to put a little more gluck on there. There we go. Yesterday I was using one of these to strip, and the question that you asked is this like 000 steel wool? The answer is no. What these are 3M stripping pads. You can kind of see that right there. They come in a 2-pack. I picked these up at Menards out here, and you can get them. They're pretty reasonable. I think it's like $2 for a 2-pack, maybe a little less. When they're on sale for like $1.50, I pick up a whole boatload. These work especially well after the second strip of the Jasco, which we're going to end up having to do 2 layers of Jasco stripping on here. These other things that I like are these other 3M pads, which are the green guys. they're going to clean a lot of the goo once I get that kind of first layer done. And I'm going to use that a lot. Again, rags are always helpful, especially when you're holding on to these weasels, because they get slippery and slickery, and with rubber gloves on, you're going to start squiggling all over the place. So this is sat for about a minute or two. Just want to kind of hold on to it, and that way I hold on to the top for two reasons. One is it's a lot easier to get a purchase on. Second is I'm protecting that number that I put on there so I don't end up getting goop on that number. And for just a first pass, I'll take the outer edge of this tool and I'll kind of scrape along, see what I'm looking like. And you can see clearly it's coming off. I mean, it's pretty goopy here, but also that I'm definitely going to have to do a second layer here because I'm getting dry underneath of this guy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just give this main part a once over. You know, the flat surfaces, if they're bigger, sometimes I'll scrape those. In a lot of cases, they're not big enough. Like these really aren't all that. I'm not doing much here. But if you've got kind of longer flat pieces, like if this were all square, it would be good to scrape it with the scraper instead of fooling around with some of this other stuff. But I'm going to take one of these little green guys here and try to just get some of the goo off of there. So I'm kind of like rolling it through. I'm using the inner part of my thumb, the knuckle of my thumb, to try to get into those grooves. So you're kind of grabbing and cranking like you're cranking a throttle on a motorcycle. You know, you're kind of getting in there and kind of stripping that stuff away. Sometimes I will take, if the varnish isn't as old as this is, I mean this is really, really old, kind of nasty stuff. Sometimes I'll just take a rag and try to do a first wipe to get the wet stuff off. You know, and in this case you can see it's not really coming off all that well with a rag. So this little green guy is probably our better bet. And as I can tell, I did manage to get crud on the bottom of this thing, but I can still see the number there, and fortunately I still have my number up top there. One thing that's always valuable, sometimes people say, well, why don't you just mark like one or two of them and then put the other pieces back where they came from? Well, what happens when you screw up and now you can't read the numbers? Trust me, that happens a lot because this is a sloppy process. Not a whole lot comes out of this that doesn't involve you getting dirty or messy, which as you can see, that's kind of why I dress up for this. I'm grabbing a different green guy just to try to get a little more off, but I'm not putting too much effort into it. I'm not trying to get it completely clean because I know I'm not going to, but you can see that I'm getting a little bit better. But when you put the rag on there, you can see it kind of sticks, so you got this extra layer that you got to kind of deal with. So, a little more Jasco in the bucket here. Make sure that we get enough, because again, you don't want to cheap out on the Jasco. You want to make sure that you're using enough of it so that this stuff comes off. The last thing that you want to do is get into the sanding phase and be fighting with old varnish, especially once you Jasco it, because all you're really doing at that point then is, if you don't get enough of it off, all you're doing is spreading it around, and then you got to sand all of this with, you know, kind of a Jasco half varnish mix on it, and it's not a whole heck of a lot of fun. Again, you know, take a little extra time, take that side of that brush and really kind of get into those grooves. The grooves are a real pain in the keister, but the one thing that I'll show you is kind of a nice trick once we get into the sanding phase. You don't necessarily have to get all the way into the grooves. As a matter of fact, on these kind of older pieces with kind of that burnished look to them, in some cases you really don't want to get all the way into the grooves. Because with that extra varnish and crud in there, it's got that kind of nice dark edging. It almost provides a shadowing effect. It feels like it's more burnished and a little more vintage than maybe, you know, something that just kind of came off the deck, you know, brand new. So again, layering this stuff on there really nice and thick. And again, this is also why we've got this tablecloth here made out of this bed sheet. We want to make sure that no matter what we do and we get on there, it's going to get, you know, picked up by that bed sheet. Once the table is, you know, done being used for this part, that's when you're going to strip off the old bed sheet, wrap everything up, get rid of all the cruddy stuff, wash down the table, put a fresh sheet on there so that you're able to do this. So I've got the second layer of Jasco on this thing. I'm going to do some more stripping. So when we get back, hopefully we will have all 4 legs kind of stripped down. I'll show you how to fix the crack in the rim, and you'll be able to see where you can do a little bit of work in there as well with some Jasco and some extra work to you know, clean up that rim as well. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.